Whenever I remember these episodes, since I never revisit them upon getting older, it really gave me the impression that these episodes have aged poorly, mainly the fact that the post-movie era just ruined the experiences when it comes to SpongeBob where it used to be. But at the same time, considering that in the older seasons, well, it had similar formulas in the post-movie era when it comes to characters, I always see Paul as the only characters that are mostly extinct when it comes to finalization, when it comes to the tropes that they are accustomed to. Granted, SpongeBob is also a victim when it comes to finalization in the post-movie era. But upon returning to the Season 7 episode, Tunnel of Glove, which I did watch numerous of times last decade, I really feel like that this episode is really an attempt on showcasing of putting SpongeBob in a position where he's always wrong, which in some occasions fans may agree, but at the same time when it comes to his relationship with Paul, it really makes literally everything that happens in seasons 1 through 3 literally pointless when it comes to his interactions and moments with Paul. The plot of the Chaperone is, well, SpongeBob has a goal in order to impress Mr. Krabs' daughter to go to the prom in order to dance with her, but also having a great time, which Paul thinks otherwise because no one wants to dance with her. In Tunnel of Glove, Paul's friends, despite being different friends from the Chaperone, make fun of her, thinking that SpongeBob is Paul's boyfriend. And since there was no one be able to sit with her in the Tunnel of Glove, SpongeBob takes the place. And truth be told, the rest of the episode is just the two being sides of the attraction, and they don't get along. Obviously they don't. And considering that this show doesn't even bother to make these characters likable like they were from seasons 1 through 3, it really makes me to believe that the ideal of this being somewhat of a shipping episode between Paul and SpongeBob, if people actually ship that, isn't worth justice, judging of how little care they did making this episode. You know, guys, for the longest time when it comes to looking at the issues that I have with the earlier seasons currently than how I did it from the post-movie era when it comes to SpongeBob being the mess up, truth be told, the reason why I never saw those as issues is because when they were done correctly, as in when the show was new at the time, it wasn't really problematic, mainly the fact that Nickelodeon, who didn't control the show when Steven Hillenburg was still around, would make SpongeBob in this episode like he was in the post-movie era. And truth be told, when it comes to the episodes after the post-movie era, it's honestly difficult to see how that would have worked in this type of format. Because SpongeBob expressed himself that he is a failure when it comes to the proms that he went to, similar to Paul. And even though that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things when it comes to this episode being mostly about Paul, it still continued the relatability of why we enjoy SpongeBob as a whole. Mainly the fact that even though I never went to a prom, people like SpongeBob who are a mess when it comes to proms and whatnot wouldn't be able to succeed in the same caliber as more popular people, especially at the age of SpongeBob. And since it's established that SpongeBob never ages and he always acts the way he is, it kind of makes sense in these seasons, but when it comes to the post-movie era, Nickelodeon doesn't even understand the limitations of making these characters have limits. Judging of how Tunnel of Glove has executed SpongeBob and Paul in the worst ways. But when it comes to Paul in the Chaperone, honestly, her crying really got old. Even though that there was a reason to feel sympathy towards her when it comes to Mr. Krabs buying her squeaky boots rather than the shoes that she wanted. But at the end of the day, it's honestly difficult to judge of how her character would have been slightly likable, considering that in the amount of times that she cries, it's never gotten to Mr. Krabs onto why she's crying in the first place. Granted, to give Mr. Krabs credit, he does understand why Paul is extremely depressed in this episode, to the point that he's willing to have other people dance with her at the prom, and since that he has no other option, he has to have SpongeBob do it. I always feel like that when Paul is done in the way, well, you can understand where she's coming from. You can relate to her depression despite the extreme crying and flooding the entire Krusty Krab. Like, considering that she really enjoys proms and the people that she hung out with are mostly her type, to say the least. It's basically her own style of enjoying the prom, and truth be told, considering of how she was in the post-movie era, I can totally understand onto why, in the execution of SpongeBob and Paul in this episode, there's a reason on why people ship these two, even though it's not well known in comparison to the shipping of Sandy and SpongeBob. Because every time I watch Paul and SpongeBob in Tunnel of Glove, it's obvious that the communication is far apart, to the point that it's totally unrecognizable in comparison to the interactions from the Chaperone. But it's the fact that I can't be able to stand Paul's attitude even more than SpongeBob's, because if she didn't like this ride to begin with, then why did she waited in line to go on the ride in the first place? If anything, it just makes me to believe that she is completely bored out of everything, despite the fact that she wants to go to places that she wants to go. So why did she go to Glove World in the first place? Yes, there's more things to do in Glove World when it comes to the roller coaster, but truth be told, I can't be able to stand Paul in this episode. And even when SpongeBob tries to do something more annoying, it doesn't change the fact that if you take away Squidward and Mr. Krabs, who are not part of this episode, you instantly see SpongeBob as basically a background character rather than a main character. And with this being a season 7 episode, it's really obvious that they took ideas from not only from the Chaperone episode, but also the episode where Paul turns the entire Krusty Krab into her own vision. Well, mainly her and SpongeBob's vision, but truth be told, it's really depressing that when you look into Paul's point of view in this, it just makes me believe that no matter what she gets, other than the stuff that she enjoys the most, she won't be able to accept it. And truthfully, the fact that SpongeBob's IQ is way more lower than how he was in the earlier seasons, it's really difficult to find any rooting for her more than SpongeBob. Like, you can make the argument that Squidward deserves to be rooted more than SpongeBob, but when it comes to Paul, no, I can't. And I think that the moment in the Chaperone really sums up a lot that you will rather watch that episode over Tunnel of Glove, is the fact that they portrayed SpongeBob as a mess-up in proms, but they actually knew how to make us feel sympathy towards him, because he really wants to make things right for Paul, despite the fact that it's just going to make things a lot more complicated and way more difficult for people to be into the things that SpongeBob does, considering that he's a sponge while everyone else is a fish. And when he did everything when it came to the list that he wrote down after listening to Paul before leaving her place, he rushes to the bathroom and cries. The girl's bathroom, but still. And since Paul actually supports SpongeBob, honestly, regardless if you find this episode humorous when it comes to the antics, keep in mind, Tunnel of Love is not only not funny, but also doesn't take the characters seriously. And regardless if this show is episodic, with these characters having different personalities from this episode and Tunnel of Love, honestly, it's difficult to separate those episodes when the flannelization just goes full gear for the wrong reasons. And with the biggest issues of the post-movie era being active in this episode, which is filler, it doesn't really make this episode any more meaningful when you see Patrick just waste more time being stupid while making things worse. Even though that this doesn't showcase Patrick at his selfishness, but it doesn't change the fact that his stupidity doesn't make anything better, to the point that when you can't be able to feel sympathy towards SpongeBob and Paul whatsoever, then it doesn't make anything interesting or serious when Patrick makes things worse in the control building. I would rather take anything of what SpongeBob and Paul caused, knowing full well that even if it did lead to destruction in the prom, you have to admit that it does make sense, judging the fact that SpongeBob is a sponge, while everyone else around him, aside from Paul, can't be able to do the sponge dance. Granted, I did not enjoy this bit like I used to, but looking back, it really makes sense. Do you want to know what Tunnel of Love offers when it came to SpongeBob and Paul being in the wild while being scared of what is going on inside? Basically, due to Patrick's stupidity, the robots or animatronics are terrifying because they lost their faces, which is why they look like that, but that doesn't last long. And when it comes to the final thing that Patrick did by using the bathroom in the control building, it leads to the entire attraction destroyed, freeing SpongeBob and Paul. This episode was meant to have the experience inside of the attraction itself, but considering that these two have no chemistry when it comes to romance, despite the fact that the chemistry in the Chaperone, despite having no romance, still has chemistry regardless, it really makes this so less meaning, judging the fact that I would rather sit through the Chaperone than anything that I've seen from this episode. And with the episode ending, well, Paul took a picture of her friends hugging SpongeBob in the same ways of what her friends did earlier by taking a picture with SpongeBob and Paul. Honestly, with SpongeBob having no self-awareness in his surroundings, I don't even think that I would probably commit to anything going on if I was in SpongeBob's place, but don't have the same IQ as him, because this is what I felt when I first watched this episode along with other episodes, and rewatching this episode again and again, I instantly knew that this wasn't the SpongeBob that I remember, despite the fact that in the earlier seasons it had similarities in the post-movie era, but then again, not in full gear. Truth be told, SpongeBob using a wax dummy the entire time is a much more better ending, considering that if Paul did found out about this and she was extremely upset. It doesn't change the fact that in other episodes in the first 3 seasons showcased her and SpongeBob doing stuff, like I said, changing the Krusty Krab into their own vision, and every time I instantly think about Paul's attitude towards SpongeBob being justified because of this alone. I don't even think it would even make a difference if SpongeBob was with Paul the entire time. Wax dummy or not, whenever I think about this, even though I had the idea that Paul may have a reason, but at the same time, considering if SpongeBob didn't do anything that upset someone that led to them being selfish in the future, it wouldn't change the fact that if you instantly see that if SpongeBob does something right, then I'm pretty sure that the other characters wouldn't even think positive. And honestly, if I think about this, it wouldn't even make the Oreo seasons better. Seriously, these Twitter people discussing on why people have been doing stuff against SpongeBob in the later seasons is completely unnecessary, and despite their opinion being opinions, that doesn't automatically mean that it's mostly facts most of the time. As in, understanding this show more, well, you disassociate yourself from SpongeBob because you don't find it funny like you used to, but those only several people who are like me that never got back into SpongeBob, despite some good things here and there. I'm just saying. With that being said, it's no surprise that The Chaperone is the superior episode over Ton of Glove. Well, the reason why I wanted to make this video is mainly the fact that despite me considering on not doing Valentine's half month again after this is literally the only way to talk about Paul's relationship with SpongeBob, and the fact that I have no other alternative to discuss Paul's character because I might miss something, and I really feel like that these 2 episodes are perfect examples on seeing her character a little bit more than how she's portrayed in the other episodes in the post-movie era. I really feel like that every time that this episode gets older and older, especially it's becoming almost 25 years old in the following month, it really made me appreciate good aspects, but at the same time, if I hear more and more people discussing on why characters act the way they were in the post-movie era, they're not making the Oreo seasons better, despite the fact that they probably didn't enjoy the Oreo seasons like some people did when they grew up with it. Yes, not everyone can enjoy SpongeBob, but when you do these types of things, it's not making the show any better. If anything, you're making it Johnny Test when it comes to characters being put in positions while being selfish with each other, and everything will work out if the reasoning and morals are what's important, which isn't helping all of us. Let's be honest. Morals is sometimes important, and when I say sometimes, you don't hammer in on them. And with literally every single character, maybe with the exception of Sandy, has no morals, honestly, it's redundant to see every single character being hypocritical. It may be a criticism, but at the same time, with every single character being hypocritical, they seriously need a reality check rather than giving other characters reality checks. It's literally a waste of an expression. I'm giving The Chaperone a 7 out of 10, while Tunnel of Glove gets a 2.5 out of 10.